Hello and welcome to Biology Bio 101. This is an exciting class and hopefully you will enjoy it and learn a tremendous amount in this class. We will use the Campbell book, the Campbell Biology book. It is a book that's used in both Bio 101 and 102. So I'm sure it was a big purchase but you'll be happy that you get to use it in both classes. The first chapter is kind of a general overview of what biology is. It's not a overly challenging chapter in order or in terms of concepts, but many of the terms are used over and over and over again in this class. So it's important that you understand the terms and also the general idea of what biology tries to do. What biologists do as their career, as their passion, as their field, is ask questions about life. So this concept of evolution is ingrained in many of in the overarching themes of biology, in the fact that one form of life feeds into another form of life in terms of function and structure. And we'll talk about that in terms of reductionism and emergent properties. And then biology is defined as the study of life. We're looking at living organisms. We don't necessarily look at rocks unless there are living aspects of those rocks, but we do look at other areas that exist or other items that exist in the world because they affect living organisms. The study of life and everything that affects it. We ask questions that can become hypothesis and can become something that then becomes a scientific study. So we aren't just asking random questions like, why is today Monday and not Tuesday? Or we don't ask questions that are more unanswerable or that we can't study. So how a single cell develops into an organism. That would be starting at what is considered maybe the smallest or one of the smallest levels of life and how it emerges into a more complex structure such as an organism. How the mind works. This is a much bigger topic. It would be a topic that would be asked, but would have to be reduced into smaller and smaller components. And then looking at bigger components, how a specific life entity interacts with communities, and that being on whatever level, whether that be on the cellular level or on an organism level. We observe, so we recognize what living things do. So we observe and record data and compare that data to what we have known in the past. And then we relate that data to what is the established themes of biology. And we will go through those themes individually. It tends to be a big portion of what this chapter is. Properties of life, so ways we categorize our observation is looking at the order. And everything has its own unique order. The image here is of a sunflower. With this, you see how the petals are arranged, how the pollen is arranged, how you have a central theme to the organization. Then we have adaptions, so evolutionary adaptions. So with regard to the little seahorse, it has adapted its color to camouflage in its environment. This is an adaptation for survival. We have regulation with the big rabbit with the big ears. What you have here is the ability to get rid of heat. Those ears are filled with blood. That blood then has a way to communicate with the environment and dissipate heat that way. You also have reproduction. We would not be living very long if we did not have the capacity to make more of ourselves. And that's us and everybody else. So every living, everything living has to propagate itself, has to reproduce. We respond to the environment, meaning we as life, I'm including myself in life. If there is an abundance of food, the cycle of the birds, etc., might have more children. If there is less food, fewer children. We see this. One of the things that we're seeing right now is the insect species are actually changing their movement patterns based on the areas that are warming and the areas that have more moisture, and so the changing environment. Some of this is good, some of it is bad, depending on what particular life form you are. Then you have growth and development. Everything starts out as a single cell and grows from that into whatever particular organism it has genetically been coded to become. And everything needs to have some form of energy in order to live. And so energy processing, whether that be ATP or that be photosynthesis, some way of taking in the raw elements to create energy within itself. These are all properties of life, 7 of them, and of course these would be terms that you would have at least a working knowledge of. The first theme with regard to, as I said, we have these overarching themes in biology that we keep going back to, is new properties emerge at each level in the biological system, in the level of complexity. So if we start at the biosphere and work back into molecules, we can simplify the emergence, but it's kind of easier to start with molecules and atoms and work into organelles and then cells. And what you find is there's properties that are in the organelles that then gave rise to more complex structure of a cell. So a cell is what we consider the basic functional unit of life, but it actually isn't the simplest. You have much more simpler portions of the cell, but the cell cannot function unless it has all of its organelles, and all of its organelles are functioning properly. So as life becomes more and more complex, you have these properties that build on what came before, so these emergent properties. And this kind of, I guess I got ahead of myself a little bit, I'm sorry, but you have these terms. So the emergent properties, as defined here, results from the arrangement and interactions of parts within a system and the non-biological or the ambient factors. So the non-biological or the factors that biology exists in. And your book makes a perfect example. It talks about you can have all the bicycle parts in a box, but it still isn't going to allow you to get from point A to point B. It's still not going to be what we consider a bicycle. It's considered a bicycle when all those parts are put together properly, and you also have somebody to power it. So you also have the energy system. So each individual part had its own unique function. It only functions as a bike when all of them are together. That's the emergent properties. You start out maybe with a chain, you put that chain around something with gears, you have pedals around that, you have wheels, and then you have a seat, and then you end up having a person sitting on it. In order to study the workings of the bike or workings of a biological system, we need to reduce the workings into smaller and smaller components. And that's what reductionism is, the reduction of complex systems into simpler components. Now, we don't make them less complex. What we do is we we reduce what we are observing or looking at into simpler and simpler components, and then build on that observation to try to understand the complex systems as well as we can. And then with regard to biology, there are system biology studies where you're looking at the dynamic behavior of the whole system. And much of what we're doing with regard to climate change is we're looking at how that is affecting so many different parts. So we are looking at systems overall of the entire biosphere and how that is changing different parts. The second theme, and we've touched on this a little bit already, is structure and function correlate at all levels of organization. So structure and function are important at all aspects. So however you look at life, you can look at the structure, and that structure will be generally designed to have optimal function. And an example here is the bird wings. What you have is a bone that is specially designed to have the capacity to have strength, but also very light. If their bones were like ours, were very dense, they would not be able to fly. So they have these bones that allow the function of bones of protection, but don't give the bird extra weight so they can lift off. And then you have these other images here with regard to mitochondria and neurons, both again designed. We talk about mitochondria in some great detail. Neurons not so much in this particular class, but both designed for their function in mind. And we do find this all the way through in all study of biology, in all types of life. Next theme, the cells. Cells are organisms. Basic, I said that wrong. Cells are an organism's basic unit of structure and function, meaning that the cell is the lowest or the smallest thing we can reduce life to and still carry out the properties of that individual type of life. An organelle can perhaps work outside of a cell, but it's not carrying out the functions of the cell. And it has to have its own space. So a cell is walled off by an outer membrane. So we usually call that the cell membrane. So it has its outer space. It has its own genetic code, so it has its own process of expressing what that particular life form is going to be. And a cell has all of the properties. It can reproduce, grow, repair, and it can turn into multicellular organisms. Two major types of cells that we look at in this class are prokaryotes and eukaryotes. And you have kind of a comparison of the two. We talk about them a little bit more. Prokaryotes, we think of them as bacterium, although that's not exclusive bacterium. Simpler in structure, smaller, individually smaller, but not as a group necessarily smaller. DNA is concentrated in a region, but not separated by a membrane. That becomes a big point, that the DNA is concentrated in a specific region, but it's not separated by a membrane. Generally, DNA is a circular chromosome. The bacterium lacks most organelles. It just has kind of the operating organelles. And there is a cell wall found around the outside. There is a cell wall. Eukaryotes are larger, more complex. They do have a nucleus that's bound by membranes and organelles that perform specific functions. We will move on and start this on the next presentation.